Director for the Office of Financial Aid at Auburn University at Montgomery in Montgomery, Alabama. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our panelists and thank them for taking the time to present on this important topic. Let's begin.
Thanks, TJ. Like TJ said, my name is Anthony Ritchie. I'm the Senior Director of Office of Financial Aid at Auburn University at Montgomery. Appreciate y'all taking the time out of your schedule today to give me the opportunity to speak to you a little bit about financial aid, and we'll go ahead and jump into it. Financial aid is basically funding provided to students and families to assist with paying for post-secondary educational expenses. A couple categories of financial aid would be gift aid, which is assistance that's provided to students that does not have to be repaid. Self-help aid, which is assistance provided that either requires the student and family to repay, or it would require the recipient to take on the responsibility for receiving the funds. A couple of different types of gift aid would be scholarships. Scholarships are typically awarded based on merit, skill, some type of unique characteristic, or financial need. Most of the time, scholarships are going to be awarded based on merit. We find that there's some that will be awarded on those other factors, but generally it's going to be awarded based on merit. Scholarships do not have to be repaid. Grants is another type of gift aid. Grants are just about always awarded based on financial need, and also grants do not have to be repaid. A couple of types or forms of aid that are considered self-help would be loans. And loans can be awarded based on the basis of financial need, or there are also non-need based loans that can be awarded, so they are not based on financial need. Students and parents both may borrow loans. There are both student and parent federal loans that can be borrowed. Loans obviously do have to be repaid. We encourage students and parents not to take out any more loan than you have to. Obviously, it's easy to take those funds out when you begin school. When you get out of school and have to start paying those back is a different story. So we see a lot of students who take out the maximum amounts, and maybe they don't need it, and they do end up in a situation where they owe a lot of funds back at the end. So if you do not have to take out loans, then we encourage you not to take out any more loan than you need. If you do have to take some out, then make sure that you're only taking out what you need, so that when it comes time for repayment, that is going to be limited to just the funds that you needed, and going to be a lesser amount than if you took the maximum in a lot of cases. Another type of self-help aid would be work study. Work study is awarded based on financial need. Usually that's going to be paid based on hours that the student has worked. And in most cases, most schools are going to pay that student through the payroll at that institution. Schools are limited on the amount of funding that we receive each year from the U.S. Department of Education for the federal work study program. So we are limited on the number of positions that we can award. Because we are limited funding, we are limited in positions. So not everyone who requests work study can be awarded work study. If you do want to be considered for the federal work study funds, be sure that on the FAFSA, when you're completing the federal application, that you do indicate that you would like to be considered for those funds. Again, they are not guaranteed because it is limited at each institution. Now, in order to be considered for federal financial aid, students would need to complete the federal application, and that is the free application for federal student aid. Okay, and in order to be considered for some types of state aid and some institutional aid, they also require the completion of the FAFSA. So you'd want to check at your school to see if there's some institutional aid that may require completion of the FAFSA, and that could be scholarships or other types of institutional aid. Why complete the FAFSA? Well, it's a free process. It doesn't cost you anything to apply, And if you want to be considered for any of the federal aid, and that's going to include federal grants, federal loans, the federal work study, you are going to have to complete that federal application. Okay, so it is important you complete that if you want to be considered for that federal aid. And again, some need-based scholarships, most need-based scholarships are going to require completion of the FAFSA in order to determine that financial need. And in some cases, state aid also requires completion of the FAFSA. Now, to complete the FAFSA, you would want to complete that online, the FAFSA on the web. I think 99% of the students, 99.9 maybe percent of students who complete the FAFSA do so online. There are still a few people who may go out and request a paper copy directly from FAFSA to complete it that way, but just about all students do complete the FAFSA on the web now. It is an annual application. So in order to be considered for financial aid for the aid year that you're wanting to receive the aid, you do have to complete the FAFSA for that aid year. The application comes out October the 1st each year. So, in the next several weeks, the application for the 2021-2022 award year or aid year will come out and will be open for you to complete and go ahead and apply for that award year. You'll want to check with your school to see what the priority date. Schools will have different priority dates. Usually ours is somewhere around March the 1st, where we request that students try to meet that priority date to be considered for aid for the following aid year. It is not a deadline, it is a priority date. Most institutions use that priority date to award limited funding programs. Like we talked about the federal work study, that is a limited funding program. We're limited on the funding that we receive. So one way that we use that priority date is students who meet that date are given priority consideration for those limited funding programs. It doesn't guarantee, again, that they'll receive it because we have more students who meet that priority date than we have funding in some cases, but you would want to check with your school, see what the priority date is, and try to meet that date with your federal application. And be sure when you're completing the FAFSA that you include all the schools that you're considering. So if you're considering several schools, be sure to include those schools in the school section on the FAFSA so that the financial aid offices at those institutions will receive the results of that FAFSA so that they can begin the process to see what eligibility you may have for financial aid at that institution. Now, we talked about financial need earlier. The way we calculate the financial need is COA, which is cost of attendance, minus the EFC, which is the expected family contribution, gives us the financial need. So what is the cost of attendance? Basically, the cost of attendance is an estimate on what it will cost a student to attend a school for a certain period, for a period of enrollment. It's going to be different for each institution because the things we're looking at in order to determine an estimated cost of attendance is the estimated tuition and fees at that institution, the estimated room and board, estimated books and supplies, estimated transportation, and personal expenses. Those are the components we're looking at in order to come up with a cost of attendance. And so you'll want to, each institution is going to be different. If the cost of attendance at Vanderbilt may be substantially higher than what it is at Auburn University Montgomery. Okay, that's because their tuition and fees are going to be much higher than what ours are. Students who are coming from out of state, their cost of attendance is going to be higher than in-state students because the tuition is going to be a little higher for out-of-state students than what it is for in-state students. So we do take that cost of attendance, and then we subtract the expected family contribution. The expected family contribution comes from completion of the FAFSA. So the federal application, when you complete that, they're going to go through, they have a formula where they calculate the EFC, and they provide that information back to the school, and then we take that and subtract it from the estimated cost of attendance at the school to determine what the student's financial need is. And then when we're awarding federal aid, if it's need-based aid, then we're taking that financial need into consideration when we're awarding those funds. Some of the components that they're looking at in that formula to determine the expected family contribution are going to be the student and parents' adjusted gross income, the taxes paid for each, the untaxed income for the student and parent, the number in the household, the number of the households in college. Those are some of the components that they're looking at, or some of the factors they're looking at to determine what that expected family contribution is. That EFC, or expected family contribution, is also used by the school to determine if a student is Pell eligible and Pell Grant. That's going to determine if the student is Pell eligible and how much eligibility the student has in the Pell Grant. That EFC is a sliding scale, and it starts at 0 and goes up. As it goes up, a student who has a 0 EFC is going to qualify for the maximum Pell for the award year, and as that EFC goes up, the Pell eligibility goes down. So we use that not just to determine the financial need for the award year, but also in order to determine Pell eligibility if a student is eligible, and then how much if they are eligible. Now, around 30% of the students who complete the FAFSA are selected for a process called verification. And basically what that is where the Department of Education requires the school to go in and verify information or data that's been provided on the FAFSA. And what the school has to do, we have to request documentation from the student, and it's going to depend on which verification group the student falls into as to what information the school is required to verify. But in a lot of cases, we have to ask for a copy of the student's IRS tax return transcript, the number of the household, the number of households in college. We have worksheets typically that we'll send out to students based on the criteria, or based on the verification group they fall into, and what documentation or information we need from the student. So, just know that if you are selected verification, it's not something that they don't believe what you put on the FAFSA necessarily. They're going to select somewhere around 30%, and they keep it somewhere around 30% that they're going to select for that process. To make sure that the information that's being provided is correct. And so the institution may request that information if you're selected verification. If you are selected, be sure to get that information in as soon as possible. Delay in providing that information will in most cases delay the student being awarded financial aid. So the sooner you get that in, submit that back to the school so that they can make sure that the student is awarded as soon as possible. Now, when you receive an award notification from the school, and that's where it will come from, when you complete the federal application, they will send an estimate to you on what eligibility you may have in the federal Pell Grant, if you're eligible, and the federal student loan programs. However, that's not an award. The actual financial aid award is going to come from the school, from the financial aid office at the school. So, know that until you get that from the school, you haven't been awarded. Okay, what you've gotten prior to that is just going to be an estimate. So when you get that award, make sure that you read all of that information that's provided with that award package. Make sure that you're looking at the amount that's been awarded and compare that to what your balance is at the institution. Don't assume that the financial aid is automatically going to cover your entire cost. In some cases it may, but in some cases it doesn't. So make sure that you compare that financial aid that's awarded for the semester, compare that to the charges and the balance for the semester, to make sure you don't have a remaining balance that you need to take care of. And if you do, then you can go ahead and start the process on how you're going to take care of that additional, that balance that's not covered by the financial aid. It won't be a surprise to you later, maybe when the schools are going through canceling schedules, something like that for non-payment. So, make sure you're comparing that aid that's been awarded to the charges that you have. If you're accepting federal student loans as part of your award package, make sure that you complete the required master promissory note and the required entrance counseling. The entrance counseling has to be done one time, before you can receive the federal aid. The master promissory note, depending on whether you accept a serial note, which would be good for up to 10 years, and you wouldn't have to complete another one for that 10 years the whole time you're in school and receiving federal loans. If you accept an annual master promissory note, then you would have to do that on an annual basis also. So just keep that in mind. If you are receiving federal student loans or accepting federal student loans, make sure that you complete those processes, because the school will be unable to disperse any funds to your student account unless you complete both of those. And if you're receiving federal financial aid, at your school, you are required to meet certain satisfactory academic progress standards, and those are included in the school's satisfactory academic progress policy. So if you are receiving federal financial aid or will be, I do encourage you to read the satisfactory academic progress policy at the school that you're attending or will attend, so that you know what those requirements are. Typically, there's going to be a certain GPA that you have to meet. There's going to be a certain completion rate on classes that's attempted that you have to meet. And then you'll have to get your degree within a certain time frame. Typically, that time frame is going to be calculated by the number of hours that's attempted. So, make sure that you know what those are at your institution. In some cases, it may be a flat GPA that you have to meet, flat 2.0. Some schools may have a flat passing completion rate at 67%. Some will have a graduated policy where when you've attempted less than a certain number of hours, you have to have a lower GPA, but as your attempted hours go up, that GPA minimum goes up, and so does the completion rate. So make sure you know what those are, so that it doesn't come up to where, after the semester you aren't meeting those requirements and you get a notification from the financial aid office that you're no longer eligible for federal aid until you once again meet those requirements. So, keep that in mind. That's what I have to offer for you today. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to take those now.
So TJ, do you have the answer to if they will have the ability to download the presentation?
So this is recorded and will be presented on the event site. I do not have the answer to if they'll be able to download the PowerPoint directly, but they'll be able to view the video at any time the entire fall season.
So one of the questions I know, Anthony, that you typically get at AUM is, I'm not sure how to complete the FAFSA, and part of your presentation you showed the link. Once they go to that link, what's kind of the next steps? What should people be expecting when they need to fill out that application?
Sorry, I think I dropped out all of a sudden. I don't know if it's this weather that's going on outside.
I was just asking, what should people be expecting when they go to FAFSA.gov and start filling out the FAFSA? Since that is something that everyone has to do, what should they expect as they're going through that?
They need to have on hand, they're going to need the tax information for the prior tax year. So it's not going to be for the tax year you just completed. So, for example, for the 2021-2022 award year or FAFSA, you're going to be using the 2019 federal tax return. So you'll need the tax return, federal tax return in W-2s. Most of the information, and there's going to be just information about the student and parent that's going to be requested. When was the parent married? The parents and student tax information you'll need both of that in order to complete that FAFSA. If you haven't already done so before you start the process, make sure you get a FSA ID and password. It's a federal student aid ID and password. You can use that to electronically sign the FAFSA, because at the end of the FAFSA, when you complete all the information it's requesting, you're either going to have to print off a paper signature page and mail it in, or you can go ahead and do that online with that FSA ID and PIN number. I encourage you to get the PIN number and the FSA ID, because you'll be able to use that. It takes usually around 2 to 3 weeks for them to process the signature page, whereas if you do it online or do it electronically, it's going to be immediate. They're going to go ahead and get that in and get that processed pretty quick. And you'll also use that FSA ID and PIN number if you take out federal student loans to complete that entrance counseling or the master promissory note. You'll also use that FSA ID and PIN number to get into the National Student Loan Data Systems. If at a later time you want to check and see, how much federal student loan have I borrowed. And other federal sites, you'll use that same ID and password to get into those sites. So, make sure that you do it that way if you can. Some people are way against doing it online. They want to do as much paper as possible. I understand that, but it is much quicker, much easier if you do that online.
Okay. We've had another question, which is, if parents are married, do you have to use both their income or just the one that claims you on their tax return? They do not file together?
Okay. Not filing together does not exempt both parents' information from being provided. If the parents are divorced or separated, that's a different situation. If the parents are married, then they would need to provide information for both parents. Depending on, again, whether they're divorced or separated, and it's going to ask that question in the FAFSA. What is the marital status of the parent? If the parent is married, then both would need to be provided unless they are separated.
Okay.
A lot of times we get questions about, well, my parent is remarried. I have a step parent. Do I have to provide their information? If the parent is remarried, the step parent's information is also required on the FAFSA. So, keep that in mind. You can't just exempt that step parent's financial information just because they're not your biological parent if they are married to your parent.
All right. Good answer. How far in advance should someone complete the FAFSA?
As early as possible is what we encourage you to do. Don't wait. I mean, we would encourage you not to wait any more than 30 days prior to the school starts. But we have a priority date. We want students to complete it at least by March. School starts in August. We want them to complete it by March, because what happens is students are selected for verification a lot of times. It gives them time to get the information together, get that to us. We have to review it. And in some cases, the information that's provided may cause us to have to ask for additional information. So it can be a timely process. So the sooner you can get that in and get the information in that's requested, the better off you are. That way you've been awarded, what your award is before classes start. Some students they're bound to determine they're going to wait to the last minute. They do that, but that's tough on them because they're having to wait to be awarded, because so many people do that in the financial aid offices. And it's not just ours, it's all financial aid offices that I've ever spoken with or worked at. We get really busy before classes start. We can't process the documentation as fast as it's coming in and at the volume that's coming in. So the sooner you can get that done, the sooner you are awarded, what your award is. That way, whenever you have started signing up for classes, you can compare that aid to the balance that you have or the charges you have, and you can make sure that you have enough aid to cover it. If you don't, then you may want to, if you're a dependent student, may want to look into a parent loan. The parent may want to look into a parent loan to help cover any difference there may be or any gap that's there between the financial aid amount awarded and the balance. Or you may have to take out a private loan or something. But it gives you time to make plans on how you would cover any additional cost if there are any.
Wonderful. So can you explain the award letter again? What exactly is in it and what does it show?
That's going to depend on the school. We use the federal shopping sheet. We send that out as the award letter, and that's it's going to provide the estimated cost of attendance. It's going to have any type of aid that the student has been awarded. So if you've been awarded loans, grants, it's going to have the amounts that's been awarded in each of those. It's going to have scholarships that may be awarded by the institution. Obviously, outside scholarships are going to come from outside the institution, so those may not always be on the financial aid award notification, especially depending on when those funds come in. If they're there before the the award notification is sent out, then they may show up on the award notification. But generally what's going to be on there is going to be what the student's aid is, the package they've received. And then there's going to be a lot of information that we give to you that we want you to read. So we may be telling you, make sure you follow these steps. Go out and read the terms and conditions of the aid. Make sure you've read the satisfactory academic progress policy. Read the information about federal student loans so that you know what you're getting into when you're accepting the federal student loans. So we provide that information to you because we want you to have that information available to you to know what's going on with the aid. If you don't read it, then you're not going to have that information. You may not realize if you don't read that information, there are different types of loans. There's a subsidized Stafford loan, which is a need-based loan that is not accruing interest while you're in school. And then there's a unsubsidized Stafford loan that is accruing interest while you're in school. So if you don't need the full amount of those two loans that are awarded, you may just want to accept the portion in the subsidized loan because that's not accruing interest while you're in school. If you don't read that information, you may not realize that there are different types of aid. So you may be not doing yourself a favor by not reading that information. So, we provide that information to you because we want you to have it. We want you to know what's going on. So we do encourage you to read it, whether you're attending AUM or whether you attend another school. Make sure you read through that, know what you're getting into. Loans are not awarded, usually are automatically accepted. Those are offered. So if you read through that award notification, it's probably going to tell you have to accept that aid for it to go any further than offered status. So it's not going to be taken into consideration a lot of times towards your balance unless you've accepted that aid, those loans. So, just read through that information that has been provided by the school, by the financial aid office.
Terrific. So the next question, what if my parents did not have to file taxes in 2019?
That's fine. When you're going through the FAFSA process, one of the answers is will not file. So if your parents did not and were not required to file, now if they were required to file, if they earned enough that they were required to file, then you probably need to go ahead and get them to file because that information needs to be provided on the FAFSA. And if you're selective verification, it could stop the process. But if your parents did not earn enough or didn't earn anything, were not required to file, that's fine. If you are selected for verification, do realize that the school may have to ask the parent to get a non-filing letter from the IRS in order to verify that, because obviously there wouldn't be a tax return transcript available. But yeah, that's fine. Lots of parents do not file, and that's how you would answer it on the FAFSA.
Great. I always love this question, Anthony, but do you offer work-study options? And if so, can you explain?
Sure. We receive funding from the Department of Education each year. And as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, it's limited. So each year, determines how much we're going to get when we get that notification from the Department of Education. So we do award work study, and most schools do. We are limited, however. So, not everyone who wants the work study receives it because we are limited on the funding, which means we're limited on the number of positions we can award. Now, what we do at our school, once we packaged, students can go ahead and get on a waiting list. If we have people who were awarded decide not to come to our school or decide they don't want the work study or need it, then we go back to that waiting list and try to award students. So, keep in contact with your financial aid office. If you wanted work study and were not awarded those funds, there may be a chance if it's turned down by others or it's canceled for others who didn't show up, that those funds could still be awarded. But you may not know that unless you reach out to the financial aid office that they could award those funds once they've been canceled for other reasons from other students.
Okay. If a student doesn't apply for financial aid this year, but the financial aid situation changes next school year, will that change the award eligibility?
No, it's going to be based on the FAFSA that's completed for the aid year that the student is wanting to receive the funds. So if you don't need it this year and you don't apply for federal aid, that's fine. You can complete the FAFSA the following aid year. If you're awarded, if you decide you need it, you can accept that aid. The award is annual. So, there are annual limits on the amount that we can award students. based on their eligibility, based on their dependency status, and based on their grade level. So, just because you didn't accept it this year doesn't mean you automatically get what you didn't receive last year by not taking it. There's still annual limits that we can award to you, but not getting it one year doesn't impact your ability to get it the following year. And we have a lot of students who maybe they didn't apply before classes started. We have students that we're receiving the FAFSA now, and classes started 3-4 weeks ago. We still process those FAFSA, process those awards. Those students just didn't need the aid maybe at the beginning. They had other resources or made other arrangements to hold their schedule, but now they've decided I need that aid, or I want that aid to pay back a loan. Maybe I borrow from someone to get in initially. I mean, it's still processed throughout the year. So even if you didn't meet the priority date or even meet the beginning of school, student can still complete the FAFSA, still would be processed by the school and still awarded.
Awesome. What's the most common or the best scholarship to apply for, Anthony?
One that you'll get. Because obviously scholarships are free money, so you don't have to pay them back. So, as long as you don't have to pay to apply for the scholarship, then it's a good scholarship to apply for. If it ever asks you, or you're asked to pay a fee to apply for a scholarship, I'd go ahead and back out of that application and go find another one that you could apply for. Certainly reach out to the school that you're going to attend or the schools that you're looking at. Find out what the deadlines are at those schools for the institutional scholarships. I'm sorry, life still happens, I guess. Phone still rings. But make sure you're checking with your school. Make sure that you're checking with those to see what scholarships are available. Make sure you know the deadlines for those scholarships so that you don't meet them. Find out if there are applications that you have to complete, or like at AUM, there's not a separate scholarship application for a lot of the scholarships. Just the admissions application is used for consideration for those scholarships. So check with the school or schools that you're looking at before you and check early to make sure you're not meeting those. You're not missing those deadlines. But any other scholarships, outside scholarships, maybe your parents, maybe at their work, maybe there's scholarships available that you can apply for. Maybe there's organizations that you or your parents are members of that you can apply for. Any scholarship you can get, or have a chance at, apply for, go ahead and apply for it. Those
fantastic. I know for AUM specifically, your application is your scholarship application, and scholarships are awarded based on GPA or ACT scores or SAC scores.
Right. Yeah, the admissions application is all that a lot of students have to do in order to be considered at AUM, yes.
Can you talk about the GI Bill or military tuition assistance?
A little bit, I guess. I'm not an expert in those, but there are different types of military benefits out there. There are federal VA benefits, which you typically apply through the VA or through DOD to be considered. There are also state military benefits that students apply for. And in the state of Alabama, that would be like the Alabama GI Dependent Scholarship that students may be eligible for. So, if your parent is if your parent is a veteran or an active member in the armed services, certainly check on those. Some schools like AUM, we have a military scholarship also. Those are things that you could certainly apply for. But if they're eligible for any of the VA benefits, make sure that you're applying for those educational benefits, Chapter 33, 35, 1606. There are benefits out there that are available, and a lot of times the parent can transfer those benefits to their dependents. So that may be something that you could receive. Certainly check on those, see what you may be eligible to receive to assist you with the cost of education. But again, there are state and federal benefits available to veterans and dependents of veterans.
So someone is asking, can they appeal if they're not awarded enough aid?
You can certainly check with the financial aid office if you haven't been awarded enough. it doesn't mean that automatically the school can give you more. So if there are special circumstances, maybe a case where there's been a huge reduction in income, which could help the student if the school factored in that reduction in income. It's something a school can look at on a case-by-case basis using professional judgment. We do have some leeway, but not a lot. I mean, we can't just say, okay, you didn't get enough loan, we give you more loan. They're the annual loan limit, so that's not the case. But in some cases, it may be that the student wasn't eligible maybe for the Pell Grant. However, there's been a huge reduction in income. If that's the case, just expect if you contact the school with a situation like that, the school's going to ask you, the financial aid office is going to ask you to provide supporting documentation. Okay, because we have to back up any type of professional judgment that we perform. So when they come in and audit our files, that we have that information available and why we made those updates or made those decisions, those judgments. So, that is a possibility, but not in all cases. Now we can certainly let you know if you didn't get enough aid. Maybe you're a dependent student and you receive Pell Grant and student loans, but you still need more. We can let you know what the process is to apply for a parent loan. If a parent is denied for the federal direct Parent Plus loan based on credit reasons, the student could be eligible for additional funding in their name, additional unsubsidized loan. We can let you know that and let you know what the process is to go through that. So, if you didn't get enough or you don't feel like you got enough aid, certainly reach out to the financial aid office and we can try to provide you information or resources that you can use to try to get additional funding to assist you there.
Terrific. So is the receipt of scholarships, will receiving scholarships impact the financial aid that someone receives?
It could. In addition, when we were looking earlier at how we determine financial need, we looked at the cost of attendance. Okay, cost of attendance is, we can't go over what we determine the cost of attendance is for the school in awarding the federal aid. And when we're determining is the student up that cost of attendance, we do have to subtract out, and for the financial need, we have to subtract out any scholarships the student is receiving or any other type of funding, outside funding or financial assistance they have coming in to help cover their educational charges. So we do have to subtract those out from that cost of attendance when determining how much federal aid. So in some cases, if a student's getting, lots of outside scholarships or lots of institutional scholarships, it may limit the amount of financial aid, federal financial aid they can get because they can't go over that estimated cost of attendance for the school.
Okay. Considering the circumstances, will I be able to contact the financial aid office virtually?
That's going to depend on the school that you're attending and the capabilities of that financial aid office.
And how are you guys functioning right now, Anthony?
Well, we're open, we're fully staffed, so we have students come into the office. We have students contact us by phone, by email. In some cases, we've had students reach out and would like to meet with us through Zoom meetings. So we try to accommodate the students as, however we can to assist them. Okay. I'm sure most financial aid officers are probably doing the same at other schools. Okay.
There is a question here about tuition discounts if parents are in law enforcement or first responders. At AUM, we have someone, her name is Jennifer Gardner. She is the manager over our scholarships, and she would be the contact person for that. But more than likely, there is a scholarship person at each university or college that you are attending that you'll be able to reach out and get that specific information from.
Right. Yeah. Most colleges do have a scholarship person, scholarship office that you can reach out to about those things.
Absolutely. The next question is, do I have to maintain a certain GPA to receive financial aid?
Yes. The short answer, yes. And that's going to be, you're going to look at the satisfactory academic progress policy at the school you're attending to determine what that minimum GPA requirement is. So like at AUM, we have a graduated policy. So depending on how many hours you've attempted, and that's going to be attempted at AUM in addition to any transfer work that's been attempted that's accepted by AUM, that's going to determine what the minimum GPA you have to have. That's also going to be it's going to determine what the minimum completion rate you have to have. And that's going to be like that at most schools. Some may have just a 2.0 and 67% passing rate. Some are going to have a graduated policy based on the number of hours attempted. Usually once you've attempted somewhere around 60 hours at most schools, you're going to have a minimum 2.0 GPA and 67% passing rate though. So just know once you get beyond that second year, typically you're going to have that 2.0 and 67% passing rate.
All right. Next question. Is there a scholarship if your parents were in the military? If so, could you explain? Good question.
Well, that's going to depend on the school. I mean, in what type of your parents, what service they had, if they were, if they had a disability, those types of things. It's going to depend on what they're eligible for. So as far as a scholarship from the institution, some schools are going to have military scholarships and military dependent scholarships. We have that at AUM. If you're looking at the federal benefits, those are educational benefits. It's not really so much a scholarship. It's more, benefit that the veteran or active member has earned. There is a state scholarship, as I mentioned, the Alabama GI Dependent Scholarship that military members from the state of Alabama in a lot of cases can qualify for. So those you would want to check with the state of Alabama to see about eligibility there. If the student's eligible, they get a certificate, and then they provide that to the school, and then the school then requests the funds for that student to the school. So they bill the state for those funds that the student qualifies for in that case.
Terrific. How does a bankruptcy affect financial aid?
It really doesn't affect a student's eligibility. If the student has filed bankruptcy, it typically is going to show up on the FAFSA, on the results we receive. However, as long as that student hasn't bankrupt on a federal student loan, which they don't let you do that anymore. At one time you could. So as long as we can verify the student didn't include a federal student loan on that bankruptcy, then it shouldn't impact the student's eligibility for financial aid, for continued loans also.
Terrific. What are the roundabout costs to attend AUM, and does this change depending on what program that is applied for?
Well, that's more a question probably for our student account office, but I think it's I don't even want to guess. So tuition is probably somewhere around $310, maybe a credit hour. At AUM, we charge per credit hour. It's available on the website, so you can check that out to see what they are. Usually, it's not going to depend on a program. It's going to be based on whether you're undergraduate or graduate. That tuition charge, it is a different charge per credit hour for graduates than it is for undergraduates. So you'd certainly want to look at those. But as far as the your major things like that is not going to be impacted by how much they charge you per credit hour. Now you may have to take labs. Maybe your program requires more labs. There are lab fees associated with the labs that could cost a little more. If you're taking classes online, that's going to have a different price than taking them face to face. If you're in a totally online program, that's going to be a different charge for those. So you'd want to check the website. At AUM, we have those are out there. The student accounts office has those out there available. But if you're attending any other school, you should be able to find those charges out there on their website.
Do you have to complete another application if you're a transfer student?
If you're transferring from one school to the other, that's going to depend on if you're transferring mid-year or not. So let's just say, if you've completed the FAFSA for this current year, for the 2020-2021 aid year, you're receiving aid at another institution for the fall, but you're going to transfer to AUM for spring or another school. you would just go add that other school to the FAFSA to the 2020-21 FAFSA, and then the results of that FAFSA would be sent to the school. Now, if you're going to start in the fall semester at a different school, you'd want to, just add that school to the new FAFSA that you're completing anyway, because it is an annual application. You do have to reapply it for each aid year.
Is it possible to have a regular university provided scholarship and be approved for a state grant as well?
Is it possible? Yes. Yeah, I mean, that happens a lot. So typically an institutional scholarship is not going to prevent you from receiving a state grant, and state grant's not going to prevent you typically from receiving an institutional scholarship.
Okay. Can you receive aid if you're a foreign exchange student?
If you have to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen in order to complete the FAFSA and be considered for federal financial aid. Most institutions will, allow international students to receive institutional scholarships. They don't have the same requirements as what the federal financial aid has, but in order to complete the federal application and receive federal financial aid, you would have to be a citizen or an eligible non-citizen.
Okay. Is applying for financial aid, if you apply for financial aid, does it impact your credit score? Oh, 1 second.
Sorry, I guess I had another interruption in service.
It's the rain.
Yeah.
If you apply for financial aid, does it impact your credit score?
Just applying for financial aid does not. Now, if a parent is applying for a federal Parent Plus loan, then that's possible, because there is going to be a credit check run on those loans. It's a credit-based loan, whereas the federal student loans are not credit-based. Those are guaranteed student loans, so the credit check is not run to determine a student's eligibility to receive the federal student loans.
Okay. And then there's a question here about, do you know of any good scholarship search engines that anyone can use?
No, not right off. I mean, there are lots of them out there. I mean, any of them that you can go out and Google, scholarship search engines, any that you see out there, as long as, again, I'll say that, as long as you don't have to pay a fee to be considered for the scholarship, applying for any scholarship is good. Again, the ones you're going to have the best luck at are probably going to be, organizations that you're members of or your parents are members of. But there are lots of students who get, scholarships from, Walmart, from all kinds of different national companies and stuff out there. So, certainly any scholarships are available, apply for those. Again, as long as you're not being asked to pay a fee.
And I'm also typing in, we have a list of scholarships, external scholarships, not just those provided by AUM, on the AUM website. And there's a link that I am typing into the answers, and that'll give you some of the external scholarship opportunities that are out there. But there are hundreds of thousands of scholarships that you can apply for. It's just finding scholarships that you qualify for.
Yeah, and if you check the scholarship pages on most schools' websites, they may have a search engine out there that they prefer, or some that they've seen students have success with. So, just look on the website of the school under the scholarship pages, and a lot of times they'll have links out there for those searches.
The next question: if I already have a bachelor's degree, am I still eligible to receive federal grants?
You're not eligible to receive the federal Pell Grant anymore. You can still receive federal Stafford loans as long as you haven't used up your undergraduate eligibility. However, the federal Pell Grant, once you've received that first bachelor's degree, you're not going to be eligible for additional funding in the Pell Grant program. There is a Teach Grant, which is a grant that if you meet all the requirements, it remains a grant. If you don't meet all the terms and conditions and the agreement to serve, then those could turn into a loan. Those may be available even if you're seeking a second bachelor's degree or a graduate degree. However, in most cases, grants, the eligibility for grants kind of goes away once you've gotten that first bachelor's degree. A lot of the grants, like the Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, is tied to the Pell Grant, and like the federal or the state grant we have is tied to being Pell Grant eligible. So if you're not eligible for the Pell Grant, then automatically you're not eligible for those other grants.
Okay. Any other questions regarding financial aid? Or scholarships? All right. Well, I know that it's a very confusing time when you are completing the FAFSA. It can be very intimidating. I know that as I have been doing them, and Anthony, that you hear about all the time, what exactly do I have to do and how do I do it? But as long as you've got the documentation that you've described here, the questions are pretty straightforward. You can input the information, and once you've done that, you contact the financial aid offices will contact you and let you know what your award is via the letter. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the FAFSA is going to lead you through it. So, I mean, if there's certain sections that do not apply to you based on how you answer one question, it'll skip sections if they're not required for you. There's also help tab. So if you're not sure exactly what it's asking, you can hit that, and it's got online help to tell you exactly what they're asking for. If it's asking you for, a certain number off the tax return, it's going to tell you to look at a certain line to get that information off of. Like if it's asking for taxes paid, it's not asking what's on your W-2, and it's asking what's on the tax return, and it'll tell you exactly which line to go from. So it leads you through that process pretty well. So, but if you have any questions when you're completing the FAFSA, certainly reach out to the financial aid office at the school that you're attending, and they'll be happy to help you, with that process or any questions you do have.
All right. Well, it looks like that's all the questions.